So, sorry, if you can come again for me to get the instructions you gave last.
So just letting everybody know that the webinar is live now and attendees are starting to connect.
Dr. Nara, do you want to test the video of the Acting Commissioner General? He was trying to do that.
Sorry, Dr. Fried, I was on the phone with the ES. Do you mind repeating?
The Acting Commissioner General, Dr. Keno, is trying to test his video and audio. Maybe I think that is where you left it.
Christine, do you mind helping?
Yes, sure, Nora. So good morning, Commissioner General. I am not able to hear you yet. I just want to check if the English channel has been chosen under the button interpretation.
Good morning. This is Commissioner General, Kenya Revenue Authority. I hope I'm audible.
I can hear you now, yes.
Excellent. So you want to go ahead and test the video? Thank you.
Yes, please, sir. So if you could kindly just click on the video to start it. Ah, there we go. Yes.
Perfect.
Perhaps move the screen down just ever so slightly. Yes, great. We can see you well. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
We would also like to invite Professor William to test his mic and audio.
Professor William, are you able to hear us? Bonjour une fois de plus à nos estimés membres de panel, à nos estimés intervenants. Juste un tout petit rappel de bien vouloir choisir votre langue de choix en cliquant sur le bouton d'interprétation qui se trouve en bas de votre écran et de cliquer également sur « Couper l'audio original ». Nous vous prions de bien vouloir parler plus lentement que d'habitude car nous avons des services d'interprétariat aujourd'hui. Plus tard, nous allons inviter le public à poser des questions sur la fonction questions-réponses. Si jamais il y a une question qui est posée en français ou bien en portugais, on vous enverra la traduction du message sur la messagerie. Merci beaucoup. Je passe la parole à notre animatrice.
Good morning and welcome delegates to the 6th African Tax Research Network ATRN Annual Congress, organized by the Africa Tax Administration Forum in partnership with KRA's Kenya School of Revenue Administration, who is our host this year. I am your moderator, Wageni Wamba from Kenya, and I'm so excited to be here in this time and space. I am looking at the chat box and excited to see the energy that it's there, and we're all looking forward to a great 3 days of a meeting of minds. This year's theme is maximizing the revenue potential of property taxes through digitalization. We're so glad to host the over 1,200 delegates who registered for this conference from over 70 countries. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Please feel free and very, very welcome. Be sure to write your name on your profile picture or your profile and write your name and the country you represent. Insert your name and then move to the chat box. I can see the chat box is already on fire. Let me know what your name is, where you are from, the country you're representing, and I would love to acknowledge your presence. In the same breath, esteemed delegates, allow me to acknowledge the esteemed presence of Madame Farida Karone, the Cabinet Secretary, Ministry of Lands and Physical Planning right here in Kenya, our host, Commissioner General of the Kenya Revenue Authority, Commissioners General, Directors General, representatives of the African Tax Administration, distinguished staff of KRA and KESRA, and our host institution for this 6th ATRN Congress, heads and officials from governments, ministries like local governments, Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Lands, heads of representatives of ATAF development partners, members of the academic fraternity, scientific committee members of the 2021 ATRN Congress, esteemed presenters, chairs, and panelists, distinguished invited guests, welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you for going to the chat box. I see you, Mr. James Mtembwe from Malawi. I see you, Christine. I see you, Joseph Tunuya, our Deputy Commissioner from here, Kenya. I see you. Thank you so much. The chat box is going up and down. Let's keep chatting, keep saying hello to your colleagues. Let us know which country you're representing. I see you, Charles from Switzerland. I see you, Sauti from Malawi, Karibuni, as we say it here in Kenya. Allow me to now share with you some housekeeping rules. We have an exciting program lined up for you. Now, to view the full Congress agenda, I'd like you to click on events.ataf.org on your URL, where additionally, I have pasted this URL on the chat box, so you're free to go there and see what more we have for you. Be sure to choose your preferred language at the top of the right button on your screen on that particular URL. Now, simultaneous interpretation services are available in the 3 ATAF working languages. So we have interpretations for French, English, and Portuguese. Please be sure to pick your preferred language. Remember, this is your Congress. Therefore, we need you to engage, engage, engage. Make use of the Q&A icon for all your questions and the chat box for all your comments, feedback, and contributions. Allow me to repeat. The Q&A will be for all. You cannot hear me. I see feedback. I hope I can be heard right now. Thank you for that feedback on the chat box. I appreciate it. I hope now. All right. You can now hear me. All right. Thank you very much. Apologies for that slight technical challenge. All right. So just sharing some housekeeping rules for us. Remember, this is your Congress. Therefore, we need you to engage, engage, engage. Make use of the Q&A icon for all your questions and the chat box for all your comments, your feedback, and your contributions. I believe this is the biggest event that's happening globally at this time and space. So we want to make it count, and we want you to help us make it count. I want you to share this particular event on all your social media handles. So if you're on Facebook or you're on LinkedIn or you're on Twitter, we want this particular event to trend. So I want to share with you our tags so that you can tag us and your tweet can be seen and get more impressions. Please take note of our social media handles. On LinkedIn, we are on Africa Tax Administration Forum, ATAF. We're on Kenya Revenue Authority, and we are on Kenya School of Revenue Administration. That's on LinkedIn. If you're on Twitter, please follow us on @KRA Corporate, @KRA _ my apologies, @KESRA _ KRA, and @ATAF Tax. I'll repeat our Twitter handles. That's @ATAF Tax, @KRA Corporate, and @KESRA _ KRA. If you're on Facebook, please tell your friends and family that you're attending this amazing event. Find us on Kenya Revenue Authority or ATAF Tax or Kenya School of Revenue Administration. Our hashtags for the next 3 days will be ATAF, TRN, and property tax. Be sure to post a comment. At the end of these 3 days together, we want to come out with 2 things. Number 1 is a policy brief for decision makers that will have key tenets for a successful property tax reform strategy. And the second thing that we want to come out with after these 3 days of being together is the second issue of the African Multidisciplinary Tax Journal, or the AMTJ. Now, this first edition was first launched in March of this year. To note is that this journal is born out of 6 years of existence of the ATRN, and it acts as a bridge between the academic researchers, tax practitioners, and policy makers. So this is indeed your journal, and we want you to own it. Esteemed ladies and gentlemen, thank you for sharing with us on our chat box and letting us know where you're listening from. Thank you, Mary from the Tanzania Revenue Authority. Thank you, Ayam from Tunisia. Good morning, Mary. I see you as well. Thank you, Komarir from the Mauritius Revenue Authority. Keep talking to us on the chat box. Give us your feedback, your comments, and remember to use the Q&A for your questions. Esteemed ladies and gentlemen, without much further ado, allow me to now welcome our partner host, Commissioner Dr. Fred Mugambi, who is the head of the Kenya School of Revenue Administration, KESRA, to make his opening remarks and then take over the second session of this Congress. Mr. Commissioner, karibu sana.
Thank you very much, Wageni Wamba. Greetings from Nairobi this morning. And we are very happy to have all of you here. And so the Cabinet Secretary, Ministry of Lands, Kenya, the Executive Secretary of the African Tax Administration Forum, Logan Watt, who is also a very close friend of the Kenya Revenue Authority, our Acting Commissioner General, and everyone else from our 70 countries that are represented here. I want to really welcome you to this particular forum. On the 12th of September 2018, during the 4th ATRN conference in Ifrane, Morocco, we as Kenya requested to host the 6th ATRN Congress. And we believed that we would be hosting it physically last year. Unfortunately, as you all know, COVID came in and it had to be postponed. And a decision was taken that this year we host it physically. It is sad that we are not able to bring all of you from these 70 countries to Nairobi. But we are also excited that this is basically the largest, I think, ATRN Congress that has been held. And therefore, we are happy to be part of this. And so we are really proud. And so my job is just simple to welcome all of you and basically tell you that we are happy as a Kenya School of Revenue Administration to be hosting this. Thank you very much, Wageni Wamba. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dr. Fred Mugambi, for your opening remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope my sound is clear and my video is good. Okay, my technical team says I am good to go. Thank you very much, sir. Allow me to now welcome to give us his opening remarks our Executive Secretary of ATAF, Mr. Logan Watt. Mr. Logan Watt, if you can hear me now, please go ahead.
Thank you. It is just when you get ready to talk and then everything goes wrong, and then your speech fades and vanishes into the internet. So please bear with me. There we go. Thank you very much. So, good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for the welcome, Program Director and Dr. Mugambi. Thank you very much for the welcome. This is a very exciting day for all of us. It is the 6th Congress of the ATRN from a humble launch in Cape Town. And I want to congratulate the team of ATAF, of Kenya School of Revenue and Administration, and the Kenya Revenue Authority for putting together this excellent event. As was just explained to us, more than 1,200 registrations for this conference and over 70 countries. So we are incredibly excited. So Commissioner General of the Kenya Revenue Authority, Mrs. Farida Karoni, Cabinet Secretary of Ministry, Lands and Physical Spaces at the Kenya Cabinet, Commissioners General of African Tax Administrations, distinguished guests, heads of officials of government ministries, members of the academic fraternity, you are all most welcome to this meeting, and I'm very delighted to welcome you to the 6th Congress of the ATRN. Since our inception, the ATRN Congress has been a pivotal platform for thought-provoking deliberations by tax administrators, policymakers, and academia, trying to, with the main aim of generating empirical and data-driven research for use both by scholars, policymakers, and tax administrations in the continent. In 10 years of our existence, the ATRN has been an important platform for domestic resource mobilization in our efforts to improve tax culture, and revenue collection across the continent. And so the work of ATAF and the ATRN has been to enhance Africa's research capacity, and the ATRN research methods training has also facilitated research excellence in tax policy, tax administration, and broader leadership. And so this is evident in the 401 papers that have been submitted to the ATRN Congress, out of which 280 papers have been presented over the time. And we've had from 2015 to 2019, more than 600 attendees attending the physical conferences. So this has been going on for a while, and we are pleased with the KRA and KESRA's hosting of the conference. Sadly, we wanted a physical conference, and I know Dr. Mugambi, you and CG Mburu wanted to host us physically. COVID has affected many things, including this conference. So the theme of this conference is particularly important at the time when we are experiencing the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic and the pressures on domestic resource mobilization. And so the subject of property taxes comes at an opportune moment. Now, let me pause on the subject of property taxes and the theme for this conference. And I've looked through the program. There's an incredibly amount of very exciting papers to be presented, and really what in modern language, I guess we would call hot conversations to be had. But let me share something else, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues. We've recently concluded a 2-3 year negotiation process on the taxation of the digital economy through the inclusive framework in Paris. The inclusive framework largely is owned by the OECD, and the inclusive framework and its processes gets reported to the G20, which is a group of the 20 most powerful countries in the world. And so the conclusion of this agreement has left us with so much to think about. I want to raise two areas that it raises, apart from the content of that conclusion itself. Firstly, it raises the issue of global governance in tax matters. It raises the issue of global legislation and tax sovereignty, especially when it comes to the social contract between citizens and the state. Because in the broader scheme of things, taxation results in not only funds the budget and funds development of domestic economy, but as you know, as scholars, it cements the relationship between citizens and the state. And so when the state makes tax policy, or when the state implements tax policy, and the way the state uses the proceeds of citizen and corporate taxation, it kind of either explodes that contract or solidifies the contract between the citizen and the state. But when there is a global agreement, and that global agreement is signed off by 20 countries, how does that impact on the relationship between a Rwandan citizen and the Rwandan government, a Kenyan citizen and the Kenyan government? When big global tax issues are discussed, but the issues of how broader global governance and consensus are reached, if we do not study the impact of that and tax sovereignty and the social contract. And so that's an important element, I guess, that the taxation of the digital economy and the process of the inclusive framework does raise. It also raises a broader issue. The process of this also raises the issue of who sets our tax agenda, and why is our tax agenda set in a particular way. Let's look at this. In Africa, for me, some of our preoccupations must be the taxation of the extractive sector. It's a huge contributor to African economy. It must be the 3 to 7% of GDP in losses through ill-conceived incentives. It must be the billions lost through illicit financial flows. Let me put it to you, that pocket of elements is not on a global agenda. And so therefore it must be on our agenda. So let's look at another pocket of things. Let's look at the taxation of the digital economy, where Amazon and Google and Facebook and Netflix, global conglomerates with its base elsewhere, becomes the topic. Base erosion and profit shifting, yes, it's important for us, but it's not been the main driver of our losses, but it has become an important global topic. The issue of the taxation of environmental taxes, clearly very important. It's not been on the top of our agenda, but those three items is very much high and determined as a global agenda, and so becomes very prominent in our African agenda. And are we asking the question in these two boxes, where should our own emphasis be lying? Why am I raising this? I'm asking this because I'm also asking myself and you, property taxes. Of course, it deals with a gap. It deals with broadening the tax mix, and it deals with broadening the tax base. But my understanding of property, and it's not a very broad understanding, a very basic one, is that property value is determined by the improvements that you put on it. And that property value is also determined by the infrastructure around it, which includes energy, roads, human resource capital, and broader access that enhances the value of that property. And the value of that property then determines the level of revenue or taxation you put to it. Just like with any business, the taxation is there not to reduce the profitability of what you can get out of it. And so, yes, we will discuss in this conference digital and other means, topography, estimation, and all sorts of very modern and exciting angles of property and property taxation on a continent where probably the definition of enhanced property would be in urban centers, and where are those urban centers and what happens to the vast, what about land in rural? You will discuss all of this. You know that a lot better than me. The context with which I am raising this is, it is important that when we discuss property tax, we need to understand why and why now, and how is property tax on the African continent different? Is it different to looking at it elsewhere? Do we apply the same principles? And if you're going to do the digitization and topography and all sorts of things, yes, those things will work. But what drives the value of land outside of the urban centers? And those are interesting things that I thought I'll ask you as the scholars on this topic. So let me say that the importance, or let me say that according to the African Property Tax Initiative 2009, property tax in Africa is only around 0.4% of GDP in average, as compared to developed countries in which property tax is the basis of local government funding and contributes about 2.2% of total income, if not more there. Property tax contributes a significant amount potentially to the broader tax base, and it is something that we need to go into, because part of especially our oil-rich African countries has been the lack of diversity of the tax mix that we get. And so during the sessions of the next few days, I challenge or invite you to explore how property taxes can enhance broader domestic resource mobilization. But I want to challenge you to explore it at two levels. At the technical level, how this can be done, but also at the level of an African tax agenda. How does one make that part of a priority that pushes what is important to us on the continent? Let me conclude. The African Tax Research Network, the Multidisciplinary Journal, our previous Executive Masters in Taxation is part of a broader ATAF offering that we hope to put into an ATAF African Tax Academy that we hope to launch next year. And we hope to put all of this together in a basket of offerings, together with our broader capacity building and training, so that we can professionalize, with the help of institutions like KESRA, both the scholarly as well as the policy and administrative offerings of both ATAF and the research network. It is our intention to revamp and enhance the membership of the network, to enhance the articles of association and governance, and importantly, to link the work to academic and training institutions on the continent. With that, I'd like to thank KESRA, the Kenya Revenue Authority, the distinguished Cabinet Secretary, and each and every panelist and registrant of this conference. To Dr. Nara Monkam and her team, thank you for putting together an excellent conference, and I wish all of us very great deliberations over the next few days. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Logan Watt, the Executive Secretary of ATAF, for helping us set the stage and giving us perspective over why we are here. Hopefully, in the next 3 days, we shall unpack all the questions that you have shared for us. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests, it is now my humble duty to welcome to the stage our Acting Commissioner General of the Kenya Revenue Authority, Dr. David Kinu, to give us his opening remarks, and thereafter welcome our chief guests, Madame Farida Karone, our Cabinet Secretary, Ministry of Lands and Physical Planning, right here in Kenya. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Wageni. Our keynote speaker, Honorable Farida Karone, CS, Ministry of Lands and Physical Planning for the Kenya government. Our Executive Secretary, ATAF, Mr. Logan Watt, Commissioners General present, distinguished participants, African Tax Research Network senior officials, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very pleased to join you today for the 6th ATRN conference. And on behalf of the Republic of Kenya and the Kenya Revenue Authority fraternity, I say karibuni sana. I take note, as Dr. Mugambi and Mr. Logan have said before me, that this conference spans various time zones of the world. It's in 3 different languages across the world, spans across 70 countries from where participants have registered, 1,200 participants with more than 400 participants in this conference as we speak. And to all that family, once again, on behalf of Kenya and KRA, I say karibuni. As a tax jurisdiction, we are very honored to host this auspicious event, and we are positive that the output of the deliberations from this conference will constitute an instrumental input in enhancing our tax administration processes as a continent. Enhancement of the tax administration processes is one of the key enablers that will lead to realization of the objectives set out in key transformation blueprint frameworks such as the AU Agenda of 2063. And among the transformation objective for Africa, as outlined in AU Agenda 2063, is domestic resource mobilization. I take note that the conference theme, maximizing the revenue potential of property taxes through digitalization, aptly resonates with the strategic direction that modern revenue authorities are taking to enhance both revenue mobilization and collection. The business environment has transformed significantly over the years, courtesy of the growth in modern technology. The robust uptake of modern technology has especially spiked following the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic, which has in a way forced businesses to shift from the brick and mortar model to digitalization in order to remain profitable in the current economic realities. The dynamism injected in the business operating environment has created a need for tax administrations to identify key focus areas for digitalization in the tax administration processes. In other words, it has been an opportunity for tax administrations to align and conform to the changing business trends for more efficiency. As our executive secretary have said before me, the benefits of digitalization of tax processes are multifold and go a long way, not only in enhancing revenue mobilization, but also improving service delivery to taxpayers. In particular, digitalization of property taxes is especially a noble initiative in the contemporary times, and I'm glad that it is actually the basis of this conference theme. Mine, therefore, at this point in time, is to wish all participants a fruitful deliberations in this conference. And I know that the outcome of deliberation from such an engagement constitute the basis for technical and policy support for tax administrations in Africa. Therefore, to all our participants, your contribution is invaluable to the African continent as we move forward in the times ahead of us. Ladies and gentlemen, it's now my duty to first introduce our keynote speaker and thereafter invite our speaker to address us and to open the 6th ATRN conference. And our keynote speaker is the Cabinet Secretary, Ministry of Lands and Physical Planning of the Kenya government. She was appointed Cabinet Secretary for Lands and Physical Planning in February of 2018, with executive powers on policy formulation and management matters. Prior to her appointment, our keynote speaker was the Chief Operating Officer at the Royal Media Services, a media conglomerate with 14 radio stations, 2 television stations, and a digital content platform. Our keynote speaker is currently pursuing a doctorate program in business administration, most particular in strategic management at the University of Nairobi. She holds a Master of Business Administration and a postgraduate diploma in mass communication from the same university, and also holds a Bachelor of Education with a bias in science, botany, and zoology from Kenyatta University. On a personal level, our speaker is passionate about ethical leadership, transparency and accountability in the management of public affairs, and she is passionately concerned about equity and sustainable management of shared resources such as land and the environment. Currently, our speaker is implementing a raft of land reforms, which include the digitalization of land transactions. It's therefore my humble duty to welcome Madam Farida Karonei, Cabinet Secretary, to speak to us and thereafter to open our conference this day. Welcome, CS.
Thank you so much, Acting Commissioner, and thank you everyone for participating. I'm really happy to be part of this conference today because it really speaks to what we are doing in the Ministry of Lands in Kenya. So the Executive Secretary of ATAF, Mr. Logan Watt, Commissioners General of Revenue Authorities of member countries, distinguished members of the African Tax Administration Forum, ladies and gentlemen. I'm really so delighted to be part of this discussion, particularly, as I said, because the area of property taxation is one area where it has been wanting in our country for a long time. And it is why the government, through His Excellency the President, decided that in the land sector, one of the critical reform initiatives that we must undertake is digitalizing transactions. And as I speak, you will see why His Excellency, our President Uhuru Kenyatta, thought this as a very, very critical reform. The theme for this Congress, as I said, is really quite apt, because I don't think you can expand tax base in this sector if you're relying on manual records to collect taxes. In our country, land has been a very emotive issue, not managed as well as we should have managed over the years. And so the land reform agenda in our country is really guided by our constitution and policy frameworks that espouse the principles of efficiency, productivity, equity, sustainability in holding and use of land, land-based resources and assets that are based on land, as Mr. Watt said. In addition, these principles, the reform process engenders the values of integrity, transparency, accountability, and equality with respect to land transactions, access to information, administration of fiscal politics in the context of land-based taxation regimes, and generally ensuring that we get the full value of this asset called land in our country. As part of the land reform agenda, the government of Kenya designed and implemented the National Land Information Management System, which in our country is called Ardhi Sasa, that is Swahili for land now, meaning that we need to do things and do them very quickly in the land sector. The National Land Information Management System is part of an e-government strategy here in Kenya, which aims at enhancing cost effectiveness, integration of government decision-making processes, timely delivery of public services, and enhancement of ease of doing business in the country and especially in the land sector. Implementation of the National Land Information Management System is a bold step by the government of Kenya to move away from manual paper-based systems that are susceptible to wear and tear of land records, time wastage, corruption, low productivity, poor integration with other public sector agencies, and distortion of the property market operations. The benefits of the digital platform include, I'm just listing a few of them, is certainty of land ownership. In our country, for instance, because of the manual transactions on manual paper records, sometimes it's not very certain to know who owns which parcel of land. So digitalization introduces certainty. So you certainly know that this land belongs to person X or person Z. It also introduces security of tenure, because once it is on a secure digital platform, then manipulation of records is very difficult. It also reduces disputes. As you know, the participants that in our continent especially, there's a lot of disputes around land because ownership is not certain. It also introduces integration with other public sector organizations, judicial organs, banking and financial agencies, investigative agencies, and as well as tax administration regimes, in our case, the Kenya Revenue Authority. It also enhances revenue collection and improves land conveyancing. The National Land Information Management System in Kenya, which is a digital platform, currently live only in Nairobi, but will be live in the rest of the country by the end of next year, 2022, aims to digitalize all land transactions and make it easy to document the rights and obligations of land and property owners, as well as investors in the land sector. Because as you know, we want to secure rights, but we also want to make sure that land and property owners honor their responsibilities and obligations before tax administration regimes. The digital data on land records will be integrated across all sectors of our government and the economy to ensure that people are sharing information. And the areas we want to integrate with other sectors of our economy will include land administration, land use planning, because we need to plan how we use our land. As you know, members, as our population grows across the continent, our land sizes are finite, so we cannot expect that the land will grow. So we have to plan it properly. It also includes surveying and mapping so that revenue or tax administrators are aware which properties they are taxing, where they are, and if need to, the georeferencing properties will take them to the location in which they need to assess the tax. We are also integrating valuation services, land adjudication, rating for taxation, land rent, and land registration processes. This is all being done under the National Land Information Management System, which went live in our country on the 27th of April this year. That's about 4 months ago. With integration of digital records and data relating to registration of persons and businesses, it becomes very easy to expand the tax base through capture of more properties into the tax regime. Because I think, as our CG will tell you, one of the biggest problems he has is really locating some of these properties that we ought to be collecting taxes from. But on a digital system, this becomes a fairly straightforward exercise. Through the National Land Information Management System, the government is also developing the National Cadastre. This is really a mapping platform which will provide digital data to all land parcels in a georeferenced format, meaning we have coordinates for every land parcel. So as I said earlier, should the tax administration agency need to visit a certain property, it will no longer be difficult to do so, because the data that we are currently building will be shared with all the agencies of government, making it easier for them to access and assess these properties for purposes of taxation and revenue generation. Under the provisions of the Section of Properties Act 2020, this is a law that came into force in 2020, that's last year, to implement rights and obligations under sectional units. That is properties that are division of buildings into units, apartments, condominiums, offices that are in collective blocks. So this law came into force last year. And under this particular law, we intend to survey all the apartments, sectional properties and sectional units, not just in Nairobi, but across the country. And this will be very good news for our tax and revenue administration regimes, because then it will be easy for them to appreciate and know that there are so many properties, this is where they're located, this is the value, and therefore for purposes of taxation, it's very easy to manage that particular component. In Nairobi, for instance, we have, I think about more than 100,000 sectional units. But I think if you ask the revenue authority, they're probably taxing just about 10% of that, because the rest is not georeferenced. So the Ministry of Lands has started a process of georeferencing these particular properties so that they can be placed on a platform which can be accessible to the revenue authorities and makes it easy for the authority to then collect taxation or revenue, or even just for proper management of these assets. In addition, the digitalization of the property regime in the country, or in our country, Kenya, is expanding the formal transaction regime to larger parts of our country. Currently, I think a lot of the tax properties are basically in Nairobi and maybe Mombasa, Kisumu, the big towns, the 5 big towns. But we know that there are many urban centers in our country which are with properties that are taxable. But because our record system is manual, it is difficult to locate and place these properties. So once the country is fully digital in terms of land transactions, hopefully by the end of 2022, it should be fairly easy for our revenue administration departments to locate and to tax these properties, which are many across our country. And as Mr. Amot said, we get very little in terms of taxes from a property, yet we know that we could get a lot more, but that happens because we cannot account for all the physical properties if our record management system is still 100% manual. So in a nutshell, dear participants, the digitalization of land and property market systems presents the opportunity for tax administration regimes to really exponentially expand the tax basis, to enhance revenue collection, to improve efficiency in enforcement and compliance, to reduce cases of tax evasion, to reduce the cost of tax collection and other administrative services, and to improve tracking and reporting for forecasting and decision-making. In the perspective of the taxpayers, the digitalization of land records and land transactions will simplify and reduce the cost of tax compliance, allow for real-time decision-making, reduce incidence of tax errors, and provide an avenue for communication with the tax administration authorities. I think one of the challenges, and I think Kerry can better speak about this, is that taxpayers are always complaining that this is not the tax I ought to be paying, or I'm paying more or paying less. But in a digital workspace, it is then easier for the authority and the taxpayer to reconcile their records and decide which is the correct amount of taxation to pay. So I think that in a nutshell, ladies and gentlemen, there's no better time to digitalize land transaction than this particular point in time, because as our population grows, we need to find better ways, more effective ways, and more cost-effective ways to enhance revenue so that we can provide better services to our citizens in the quality in which and desire. And as I conclude, ladies and gentlemen, I wish to say that the use of ICT technologies in the property sector provides a really great opportunity for tax administrators to deploy machine learning, artificial intelligence for risk management, fraud detection, and compliance, and compliance with tax and customs laws. So ladies and gentlemen, I may not be an expert in taxation matters, but I know that with what we are doing, a CG, that one of these days he'll call me to buy me lunch because I have given him so much property to tax, and that will happen in the fullness of time. So ladies and gentlemen, as we discuss over the next 3 days, I would appreciate a lot of feedback on what we are doing, whether we are doing it right. Our platform is a web-based platform, so you can log on, tell us where we can improve, because we want to work with all the agencies of government and partner with colleagues across the continent and other parts in order to improve access to this asset called land, because as I said, it's limited and it cannot expand. So with those few remarks, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to declare this conference officially open. I wish I could be part of all the deliberations, but my office is very open to a lot of feedback. We get a lot of feedback from stakeholders, and this is one such forum. I would really appreciate to work with all of you in order to improve what you do and what we do. I thank you very much for your kind attention. Have a good morning.
Thank you very much, Madam Karone, for your inspiring words and for officially opening the 6th Annual Congress of the African Tax Research Network. Thank you so much, Madam. I'm sure you have raised a lot of curiosity amongst the delegates on the reforms your ministry is carrying out, the ADISASA, the land digitalization, and the National Land Information Management System, among others. We, I think, are all looking forward towards that launch because a lot of property shall finally get to the grid. Thank you so much, Madam Karone. Please allow me to humbly request you to stay on for just a few seconds so that we can take a screen grab of this particular session that is being recorded in history. As Dr. Commissioner Mugambi said, this is the first time that we have a huge pool of registrations from different countries. So allow me to kindly request you, Madam, to leave your video on and to request all our panelists, chairs, and our key guests to switch on their videos. We're going to take a screen grab in just a few seconds. I see you, Dr. Mugambi. I see you, Madam Monica. I see you, Professor McCluskey. Good morning. I see you. I thank you so much. I see the videos coming on. Thank you so much, our Acting Commissioner General, Mr. Dr. David Kinu. Can I please have more videos on? I want to take the screen grab in a few seconds. Thank you, Mr. Commissioner General from Rwanda. I see you. Allow me to take the screen grab. Smile.
Thank you.
Okay. There we go. I think we're good. Thank you very much. Thank you for your kind attention. Thank you for your presence, Madam CS. We truly do not take it for granted. And thank you for inspiring us. And please take our pleasure, our warm greetings to your team on the ground, and we're looking forward to the great engagement and the feedback that our team will share with your team.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you. Esteemed delegates, it is now time for us to listen to our Policy Dialogue 1, Unlocking the Potential of Property Tax Amidst Negative Impacts of COVID-19 on Government Revenues. Now, this session will be chaired by Professor William McCluskey, the Extraordinary Professor of the African Tax Institute, University of Pretoria, South Africa. He will also handle the panel discussion and the Q&A session. I do encourage you to engage. Professor McCluskey looks very ready for us and is ready to take on the session. Good morning, Professor.
Hey, good morning, everyone from Northern Ireland. And I can see that we've got 462 participants from across the world. You are all most welcome to this first policy dialogue that's going to sort of delve into some of the issues that property tax has been challenged with a global pandemic. Let me just first just remind participants that if you have any questions for the speakers or for the panelists, please write them in the Q&A. And I'm going to be sort of multitasking over the course of the next hour or so, looking at the various questions that have been typed into the Q&A and hopefully picking some of the more really interesting ones that our panelists and speakers can respond to. But first, let me just give a few introductory comments from my side. And I think COVID-19 has created this unprecedented economic headwinds, faced by national and local government in terms of revenue mobilization. I think in reality, it's the perfect storm. And we're still in the eye of that storm at the moment. We've just seen the end of the Olympic Games and the Paralympic Games in Japan, Tokyo, Japan, with no spectators. And when you think about the cost in terms of infrastructure to actually host an event of that scale and then have almost no revenue from tourists, from people wanting to attend and see all of these events, you can just understand the magnitude, the scale in terms of the impact that COVID has had. And I think when you look at what has happened with national governments imposing national lockdowns, people having to work from home, businesses closing, borders being closed, airlines being affected, no tourists being able to visit particular locations. And then you have the impact on businesses. In many ways, those that really depend on customers visiting, tourists visiting, etc. But in relation to property tax is about real estate. And in many countries, the property tax is based on the value of that real estate, whether it be land and buildings or just land or just buildings. But there is this element of value estimation. So with COVID, what we're seeing is increased vacancies, properties becoming empty, businesses closing down, going into liquidation. You're seeing landlords having to reduce rents to almost zero. And then they're coming to national government, looking for some sort of compensation or some way in which they can manage their business through this perfect storm. So there have been quite a number of initiatives internationally by both local government and indeed national government. The waiving of property tax for up to maybe 1 year, the waiving of late payments, interest on those late payments, national government reducing VAT. So there have been quite a number of fiscal measures trying to react to this pandemic. But in many ways, local government is on the front line. And I think the expectation is that they would like national government to assist them through possibly more compensatory grants to enable them to weather this particular storm. But national government at the moment is the most indebted that it has ever been. And it is going to take some time to come through this particular problem. But let me stop here. Time is pressing. There are going to be now 2 presenters. Each will have around 10 minutes to give their presentation. At the end of the second presentation, I'm going to open it up for some of the Q&A, and that'll be around 5 minutes before we get into the panel session. So what I'd like to do now is invite the first speaker. That is Dr. Seydou Coulibaly, and he is the Senior Country Economist of Burundi. So the floor is now yours. Thank you.
Greeting from Abidjan. Thank you, Professor McCluskey, but I cannot put my camera. I don't know why. Maybe the IT team could help here.
Yes, we will do so.
Yeah, it's fine now. It's okay. Thank you. Thank you, Professor. I would like to thank ATRN for this opportunity to set the scene for discussion through the presentation of my paper on decentralization, digitalization, and the tax assignment problem. I will share my presentations. Yeah, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see.
Okay, thank you. Yes, as I said, that my presentation will be articulate around decentralization, digitalization, and the tax assignment problem, evidence from property taxes in Africa. So this is the structure of the presentation. I will start with motivations and provide a discussion on the decentralization versus centralization of property taxes in Africa. And then I will very quickly look at the empirical aspect of the analysis. And then I will conclude with the main policy implication from the results. Before the pandemic, policymakers in Africa were aware of the importance of increasing domestic resource mobilization. But the COVID pandemic has, emphasized, reiterated the imperative for the continent to increase domestic resource mobilization, because donor countries, will, affect more fund to their own policy response measures. So clearly, the main takeaway from the pandemic is that Africa should increase domestic resource mobilization. This is important to finance policy response to the pandemic and the recovery policies. So having said that, policymakers will think about the main policy option, to stimulate domestic resource mobilization. And in this regard, the exploration and of untapped and underexploited source of revenue will be examined. And in addition to that, tax administration will also consider enhancing the benefits from IT system in order to optimize, to increase tax collection. If you look at the literature on tax mobilization in Africa, you will see that property tax is among the taxes which revenue potential is not fully exploited in Africa. In terms of collection performance, property tax revenue does not exceed 0.5% of GDP for many African countries. So if we agree that the potential of property taxes is not fully exploited, so we should question what are the challenges, the obstacles to the mobilization of property taxes. So the challenges to the collection of property taxes range from the lack of administrative, financial, and technical capacities. And from the lack of capacities, there are also resistances from some property owners. So the lack of capacity is the key argument that some experts put forward, to indicate that the central government should be responsible for property tax collection. So this view clearly contrasts with the conventional tax assignment literature from Musgrave, pointing to property taxation as a local tax. And if you look at the performance of central government in collecting property taxes, you will see that the performance is not so much as satisfactory. So with the above, it's clearly that this background relates with debate on property tax collection in the continent. Now, what we will do, I will estimate the performance of local governments in collecting property taxes compared to the performance of central government in collecting property taxes in a digitalized environment. So by doing so, we contribute to the literature on fiscal decentralization and to the literature on tax mobilization. Now, let me give very quickly some background elements on the debate on the assignment of property taxes. The defender of decentralization of property taxes put forward the argument of accountability, because they think that the decentralization of property taxes could contribute to build accountability between local government and citizen. And this could, improve the provision of local public goods and services. And a key element related to the idea of decentralizing property taxes collection is related to the nature of the property tax base, because immovable properties are visible, okay? They could not be shifted between jurisdictions, tax jurisdiction, to avoid taxes, and they also provide an indication that the owners are wealthy individuals. From political economic perspective, this is very important. The decentralization of property tax collection could avoid that the central government starve funds from local government controlled by opposition parties. Another argument related to the idea of decentralization of property tax collection is related to the strong incentive for local government to collect property taxes, because the central government may have other alternative source of revenue. But if you consider local governments, property tax is represent a larger share of revenue. So based on that, it's important to assign the collection of taxes to local governments. The last argument is related to the idea that the decentralization of property tax collection could improve the tax mobilization. Now, there are some arguments against the decentralization of property tax collection, which is related to the lack of capacity. For instance, in Uganda, there were only 11 assessors for valuing 3 million parcels, and the same for Tanzania, 100 assessors to value 5 million parcels. So let's say something towards on the stylized effect on property tax collection. Generally, Francophone countries, centralize the collection of property taxes, while Anglophone countries, except Liberia, use a decentralized system. But recently, we experienced some changes in the government level in charge of property tax collection. Yes, this is I represent here the evolution of property taxes over the government level, and you can see that local government perform better than the central governments. And these are country experiences. I think we will have time to elaborate more on country-specific experiences, because Rwanda has centralized property tax collection from 2014, and as shown here, there is no clear evidence that revenue collection has improved. The same for Tanzania. For the interest of the time, I will switch this part, and and say something on the experience from Madagascar, which is a francophone country, but as a decentralized property tax collection. And the first year after the decentralization, we saw increase in tax collection, but after the absence of ICT system and poor valuation reduced the collection performance. Yeah, what about the empirical analysis? I specify a empirical model to estimate the revenue performance of local governments on property tax revenue. So this is the model. I use a dummy variable which takes value 1 if the property taxes are collected by local government and 0 otherwise. I control for the standard determinant of property taxes that I will show you in the next slide. And I use a non-parametric approach, propensity score matching to identify the effect to address the selection bias problem. And yeah, these are the variables I include in the model: access to electricity, urbanization, and the procedures for property registration, corruptions, digitalization of tax payment, and accountability.
3 minutes, Dr. Coulibaly, please.
Okay.
3 minutes. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Now these are the sources of data that I use. World Bank data for macro data, ICRG for institutional variables, and as in terms of results, I think I found that the decentralization of property tax collection increased property tax revenue, and the effect is 0.2%. This result is robust if I consider the sub-period from 1990 to 2017, because decentralization started from 1990 in Africa for many African countries. Now the last point that I wanted to mention, I look at the joint effect of property tax decentralization and digitalization, because digitalization can play a role in strengthening property tax collection. And I find that, yeah, the collection performance of local government increase with digitalization. To conclude, we evaluate the revenue impact of property tax collection for 44 African countries over the period 1918 and 2017. And we think that the decentralization of property tax collection increased property tax revenue, and the revenue gain is 0.2%. And the digitalization of property tax collection also provide an additional percentage point to the revenue performance of local government. Now, what is the main takeaway, the main policy implication from these results? So these results suggest that when subnational local governments are capacitated with adequate ICT infrastructure and skills, and when the responsibility of property tax collection is concentrated on their hands, they are likely to outperform central government for property tax revenue mobilization. I thank you for your attention. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you very much, Dr. Coulibaly. Extremely interesting. I wish I had been able to listen to all of it. My internet kept dropping off. So let me, in the interests of time, let me move very quickly across to Mr. Adams Tommy, who is actually quite a late addition to the agenda. So Adams, over to you. You have 10 minutes, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Unfortunately, I was just being informed this morning to step into the shoes of Adams Kagu, but notwithstanding, let me see what I can do, what justice I can do to the topic. So, harnessing the property tax, then as some property tax potential, property tax in Sierra Leone. And So I'll be looking at what the law states about recurrent property tax in Sierra Leone and what's done in practice. We have the point-based system and the simplified hybrid version of the point-based that was introduced in Freetown City Council in 2019. I'll look at the performance of recurrent property tax, the current performance for the past decade, and the lessons learned. So I'll keep it short for now. Generally, we know that property tax is a base suitable for local government in developing countries and the West, of course, including Sierra Leone. On economic efficiency and equity grounds, the tax is reasonable, fair, visible, stable, and predictable over time, roughly progressive, and loosely correlated with local government benefit. Yet, compared to developed countries, it's the least taxed. In developing and transition countries, property tax constituted about 0.3 to 0.6% of GDP in 2010, and for 24 African countries classified by income category, including Sierra Leone, property tax on average constituted less than 0.4% of GDP for different time periods. So by law, what the law states about property tax in Sierra Leone, I'll be looking at the tax base, the rates, responsibility for setting the rates, objections and appeal, and the rest. So it's in terms of the scope, the tax is on building, including government buildings, with exemptions listed separately. The base is the total of the assessed annual value of all buildings, which the amount at which the premise can easily be let out in the open market over a period of time, usually 1 year. Yes. So section 69 states that the rate shall be uniform on the assessed annual value. Section 70 gives a list of exemptions, the normal exemptions, church, chapel, mosques, meeting houses, etc. But government buildings are not exempted. Section 71 stipulates that a council may appoint a valuer and assessment committee. And in terms of collection rates, section 75 of section 1 states that the rates should be payable by owners of both occupied and unoccupied buildings. There are provisions that if a taxpayer failed to pay, the property should be seized or forfeited by the council. Enforcement of payment of rates may be in the form of both levy of ownership and occupier goods for non-payments. Sale of removable property is an option for that. Objections to the administration of rates is limited to valuation rules provided for section 73 of section 1, which state that the objections and amendments of valuation list rule shall be determined and made in accordance with procedures set by the ministry responsible for local government as it may be prescribed. So what currently operates, the law is one side, but what currently operates? The point-based system was first piloted. The local councils are implementing point-based. In 2019, the simplified version of the point-based was introduced in Freetown City Councils. But for the rest of the councils, generally it's point-based. So this was first piloted in Makeni in 2006 and scaled up in most councils up to 2018. So I mean, there was a Canadian value and charters of view that the government contracted to scale up this at least initial points-based in some councils. And the simplified version of the points-based system introduced in Freetown City Council in 2019, I think with the support of DFID through ICTD. So the point-based, it's a program loosely. The point-based is a program loosely based on earlier work of the Linga and similar stages of property tax processes by Kelly, which include identification, valuation, collection, and enforcement. The objective of this is to efficiently assess all properties so that a fair system of tax can be implemented. It depends on the performance of 5 stages: discovery, assessment, billing, sensitization, and collection. The system should be an ongoing process, a repeated process that should be carried out annually, because new properties have to be discovered and assessed, adjustments have to be made in the rates, and the billing collection stages have to be followed. So a progressive system is to tax a greater amount of those more able to bear the cost and vice versa. So to this point, to this process, property characteristics are identified, weights and mill rates are determined based on the category of properties that are being assessed. If you see what I've done, I've tried to implicate in formula form how the points base work. So this is the formula for the points base. We have the internal irritable value, is the base value multiplied by the base factor, and this is an explanation of all the terms. The base value is the flow area, and the base factor is the tariff that's subjective. The value adjustments that are also subjective determine ranges from 30 to ranges from minus 30% to 30% at 5% intervals. They include certain features of the buildings like roof conditions, toilet facilities, property conditions, and the like. But these are all determined by the council. The main rate is also fixed for different classes of properties. For residential, it's different, and for commercial and industrial, it's different. So the potential of rates. So I've taken 9 local councils and presented the potential, assuming compliance rate is 100%. Like for both city council, you can see it's $123,000. Assuming compliance is 100%. And Moyamba District Council, $53,000. But what you could see here that the city councils have a lot more potential rates than the district councils, as taken from the point basis. So if you could see the interesting part of this presentation is what clearly shows that about 85% of the properties that are assessed, you understand, pay less than $10 out of all the properties assessed in the 9 local councils. About 85%. The next slide, please. So the figure shows that on average, 85% of the total value of the assessed properties were actually valued less than $10. Less than $10. So for all the assessment that is done through the points based, for 9 local councils, about 85% of it are valued less than $10. Another 6.3% valued between $10 to $20. Less than 3% of the properties actually pay between $20 to $200, with an average of 1% paying more than $200 per annum. Next. So this is the performance of rates over the years from 2005 to 2019. I mean, local revenues and properties, if you could see, this is fluctuating. There are times that the rates will be high, you understand, there are times that it's low. And I know in between the Ebola period, the Corona period, take account of that. But more importantly, even capacity within the councils keeps on varying. I mean, support, political will, all these are the factors that keeps on varying. During the times of elections, you see it being low. During times that are no election, rates are high. Next.
3 minutes, Adams, please. Thank you.
Yes. So for the simplified hybrid version of the point-based system, this like a simplified version of the point-based. The system uses both surface area and easily observable characteristics of building referred to as adjustment factors to arrive at an estimated market value. So like the points-based system earlier implemented in other countries, this version introduced in FCC practically assigns a standard number of points based on the surface area. I mean, this is just an improved version of existing system. In addition, the points are awarded for positive features or deducted for negative features. They are like location, construction type, materials, and the rest. The system also considered various processes within the tax cycle, discovery, assessment, billing, like the earlier version. But the process includes both an application of data gathering in the field and back office application for managing billing, payments, and compliance. So the entire process is managed by custom IT system. So this is also the simplified, what we call, I mean, formula-based simplification of the hybrid version. So these are the factors they consider. Next, you see, I've just simplified this, at least for the, you understand, for those that are using it. They are, from the formula, we have roof line measures, number of floors, and the rest. But more, yeah, the rateable surface area and the rest. But that's just detail. If you look at that figure, if you look at the figure, if you see again, out of the about 97,000 properties that were discovered in Freetown, about 34% of those properties pay less than $10. So if you look at the trend is consistent with the earlier version of the system. Next slide. So in summary, out of this one, like I stated, out of 97,000 properties, you understand? Yes, about 34% actually pay less than $10. Yeah, and another 21.6% are valued between $10 to $50. Only 3%, like 3,121 of the total value of assessed properties, actually pay above 28,000. So even with the point-based system, you actually see that you understand the potential is very, very low if you really want to harness property tax potential in Sierra Leone. Next. So what are the lessons learned from this? It is important to know that automation enhances transparency, billing and collection, and taxpayer monitoring, reliable payment mechanism, and improve tax trust and confidence. It is believed that the appropriate use of valuation systems like the points-based in property administration can materially simplify valuation and assessment process. But the point to note is simplification to which category of stakeholders? Is it to the valuation officers and to taxpayers? The reference to the application I've just mentioned. Because based on the formula, would you want to call that a simplified system or not? These administrative options actually to improve rates is critical to improve compliance and tap the potential of it. That is, by looking at not the policy variables like the base and the rates, but by looking at by varying collection assessment ratios and eliminating some illegal exemptions will actually increase the potential for it. Political issues have to be resolved at the outset. Of late, when the implementation of the simplified hybrid version of point-based commenced in Freetown City Council, there were so much, because Freetown City Council is an opposition council, there are so much issues with the central government, that rates are high, the base they were coming from is low. So all these issues are important to be considered. A strong leadership with commitment from the political head to support the system is also critical. Typical council staff are not highly qualified, often due to salary constraints, and thus in-house valuation expertise cannot be expected. Dedicated and well-designed, easy to use and update software working on standard off-the-shelf hardware is a central requirement. Because for most of these systems, they are rights protected. Every year, you need to send back to the designers to pay license fees. These are all you understand we should consider if we want to do this. Important, it is also important to link rates collection to local services. Thank you very much.
Okay, Adams, thanks very much. Keeping on time, and I know the time is a little bit precious, but we do have a couple of minutes before we begin the panel session. There have been a couple of questions, a couple of comments, and I appreciate that people first day a little bit slow in communicating their interest in asking a question. So let me just go through these very, very quickly. There was one question, is the property tax similar to capital gains tax in other countries? Let me answer that one. The capital gains tax is an event-based tax. Capital gains becomes applicable on a particular event. If a property is sold, there may be a capital gain and therefore that tax is applicable. Property tax is different because it's recurrent, it's every year. Jean-Bernard Dumelito did ask a really made an interesting point that I'm sure will be debated over the course of the next couple of days. But I'm going to ask Adams if he would like to maybe make a brief comment on this. Basically, what he's saying is taking into account of what has been said, complexity, capacity, constraints, digital development, wouldn't it be preferable to focus on core taxes, personal income tax, corporate income tax, PAYE, well, that's a system to pay, VAT, excises, and efficiency of tax administration before implementing tax on property, whose yield will be in any case somewhat modest? Yes, an interesting one, Jean-Bernard. But Adams, would you like to give a comment as to whether or not the big national taxes should take precedence over the property tax? Over to you.
Yeah, the national taxes are there, and for national taxes, I think even if you look at the composition of national taxes, the big taxes like VAT, PAYE, and the rest account for like 60 to 70% of the government's national revenues. But these are national taxes. And property tax is subnational tax. But what is important is if you look at the government and governmental transfer system, about 70 to 80% of funding to the councils come from the central government through fiscal transfers. So in essence, I know the government is improving its efficiency to collect those taxes, but most of the proceeds of those taxes go back to the central government in the form of fiscal transfers. The law is clear about the taxes that are supposed to be administered by subnational governments, and that's what we focus on actually. And I mean, there are provisions in the Local Government Act that gives government a leverage to even increase other taxes to the councils. But as it stands now, there are clear taxes that are supposed to be collected by some national government. Property taxes, one, there's a local tax, there are market dues, there are mining revenues for councils that have mining activities and other fees and charges, right? But the national taxes are there administered by the National Revenue Authority, and part of the proceeds from that are used as intergovernmental transfers for services that are tied, like primary health, secondary health, understand, welfare, social welfare, waste management issues. So, and if you look at the baskets, the revenue baskets of subnational government, about 70 to 80% of what they spend actually comes from the central government in the form of fiscal transfers.
Thanks, Adam, for replying. And indeed, there was another comment made related to Dr. Coulibaly's presentation. I think this is maybe something that he can pick up with the person that asked the question, and I think it might actually take quite a while to answer that. But let me move on quickly into the panel session. And for the panel session, we have got 4 panelists. We have got Mr. Pascal Rugan, Commissioner General of the Rwanda Revenue Authority. We have Madam Monica Obongo, who is the Deputy Director of the Land Valuation in Ministry of Lands, Physical Planning in Kenya. We have got Mr. Jean-Claude Mondo, Property Tax Central Coordinator, Ministry of Finance, Cameroon. And we've got Professor Odd Feldstadt from the Christian Michelin Institute coming out of Norway. You're all very, very welcome. And the way that this panel is going to work is, and we have about 25 minutes or so, is there a number of questions that have been pre-prepared by the conference organizers. I'm sure that these questions have been circulated with the panelists, but I'm going to raise each question in turn, and then I'm going to ask each of the panelists to make a brief comment on each of those questions. And I can see that this could take like 1 hour, and we don't have that, unfortunately. So please keep your comments as concise as possible. So let me begin with the first question. Again, it's related to the pandemic, the mobilization issues of property tax revenues. So the question is, in your view, what are the administrative challenges African countries are facing in the mobilizing of local revenues? And can I ask Mr. Pascal Rugan Inetwali to respond first? Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. William. First of all, I want to say that as Rwanda Revenue collects for central government taxes, the government has also mandates Rwanda Revenue Authority to collect for decentralized entities. This because there was many inefficiencies in collecting these revenues. So we do collect on behalf of them. And when we started now, 6 years down the road, there was no data, no system. We really started at 0 points. And we tried first to put in place a system, what you call local government tax system, and try to build the data. And then, as I said, or as requested, you also face many administrative challenges. Now, we, for instance, have an issue of property valuation. As we just keep considering the self-assessment, this is our system, so we don't have a tool for property valuation. But also there is still a large number of non-filer and non-payer of these taxes. Thirdly, we also have an issue of mismatch between information we get from the Rwanda Land Management and Use Authority with those we have in our tax systems. But also, we also have some many plots which are not registered, hence not paying property taxes. So all these are challenges. Maybe the question is, how do we do to overcome these challenges? Going back to the second question on where countries successfully, maybe this will become after. I don't know, Mr. William.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, a brief comment in turn on the questions. So let me turn the matter over to Mrs. Monica Obongo. Have you a comment on that particular question?
Thank you so much for the opportunity. Administrative challenges in Kenya are mainly data-based. We don't have a central database where both national and county government can use for property taxation. And we have different types of property taxation. We have the rates, the land rent, and the stamp duty. With the development of the cadastre, there'll be a more central database where valuations and property taxation can be done in a more synchronized way. So in a nutshell, it's just data that is not synchronized yet. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. Over to Mr. Jean-Claude for your comment.
Merci. Oui, merci beaucoup pour merci beaucoup pour l'opportunité que m'est donnée de dire un mot sur les défis. J'aimerais juste partager un écran alors qui porte sur les défis que nous rencontrons notamment pour la taxation locale. C'est-à-dire qu'au niveau de la politique fiscale, il est important pour nous d'instaurer des taxes ou des redevances qui soient équitables et dont la matière imposable doit être facile à capter. Le second défi que j'identifie au regard des discussions et des questions porte sur la clarification des modalités d'administration de cette taxe-là en privilégiant autant que possible la simplification et la digitalisation. Nous avons notamment au Cameroun un certain nombre de taxes, petites et très petites taxes qui ne sont pas faciles à administrer et qui ne sont pas évidentes à collecter pour les collectivités. Alors, le troisième point que je souhaiterais aborder, c'est la mise en place au niveau local de structures appropriées aux cibles que nous cherchons à atteindre. Dans le cas de l'impôt foncier, par exemple, il est nécessaire que les structures qui soient en charge de l'impôt foncier soient le plus près possible des populations, le plus près possible des locaux, des immeubles en question, des immeubles visés, afin d'être sûr que nous ayons un optimum dans la collecte. Et enfin, avoir la maîtrise, les deux intervenants l'ont dit tantôt, avoir la maîtrise de la matière imposable, c'est-à-dire avoir la maîtrise même des personnes qui devraient payer des immeubles qui font l'objet de paiement de l'impôt foncier, par exemple. Donc voilà, a priori, ce que je pourrais dire sur le défi de la taxation locale. Merci.
Okay, Jean-Claude, thank you. I don't think it's necessary to share your screen I think you can just respond, verbally to the various points. It might save a little bit of time. I'm going to turn it over to Professor Felstad. I'm sure he would like to make a comment, though his questions are a little bit different. Odd, have you anything to comment on this?
Yes. Do people know the question, or will you briefly read it?
Well, it was, what administrative challenges do African countries, in your experience, face in mobilizing local revenues?
Yes, I'm not an expert on the US tax system, but since during the last 3 decades, I'm mainly focused on tax reforms in Africa and advisory work in East, Central and Southern Africa. But anyone who is interested, seriously interested in property taxation needs to look at what is happening in the US, where we find some of the most elaborated property tax regimes at the local government level. But it's important to emphasize also that the experiences and lessons from the US may not immediately be translated into the African or European and other regions context. But it is important to emphasize here that property tax have for long been a main pillar of local government finances in the US. It can be traced back to the 1800s, and it gained then thereafter momentum in the first half of the 20th century, spurred by the economic struggle during the Great Depression in the 1930s. All the 50 states in the US have property taxes, both at the state and the local government level. If we look at local government-owned revenues, there are huge differences between and within states. But generally, cities in the US generate the majority of their revenue by designing their own tax and fee structures within the limits imposed by their states. For instance, limits related to property tax limits, debt limits, constraints on access to some taxes, sources, and so on, which we also see in other countries. But as a consequence, local government tax structure vary very much across the United States, with some municipalities relying heavily on property taxes and others primarily on sales taxes. In the US, they don't have a national VAT. It's the sales tax at the state level. The pandemic's impact has been immediate and more severe on some local government finances than others, depending on their mix of revenue sources. Retail sales have plummeted and unemployment skyrocketed. Thus, a city that generates the majority of its revenue from sales or income taxes have been hit hard and immediately when it experienced such consumer declines and job losses. Historically, the property tax has provided stability to local government revenues in bad times, since it is locally controlled and not immediately affected by changes in economic conditions. Therefore, local governments, which depend most heavily on property tax so far, have been more insulated from the pandemic's immediate budgetary effects of economic contraction and social distancing requirements, which affect other sources like the sales tax much more directly. Therefore, a city that relies on property taxes will not experience such an immediate collapse in its revenues. So the short answer to the question is that there are at least two lessons for African and other countries. Developing the property tax system is both a measure to raise local government revenues and also a measure to secure more stable revenues in periods with economic contraction. In other words, the municipalities or local government's tax structure will affect its short-term outlook. But there is a but, because although higher reliance on property tax revenues is generally more favorable in the short term, a less diversified structure will limit the resilience of local government budget in the medium to long term. Because as Professor McCluskey also emphasized, the the pandemic, if it lasts, it will have impacts on property, people's ability to pay property taxes. And this implies a third lesson. Even though property tax has potential to raise substantial revenues and is less elastic or responsive in the short term to economic and natural shocks, a more diversified revenue base is preferred for local governments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Odd. Very comprehensive response. Maybe I could turn now to Pascal. In terms of Rwanda, has your country made any interventions in which to mitigate the effects of the pandemic? Over to you.
Thank you so much. Yes, as I said, with this issue concerning the non-registered properties, so what we implemented by data matching, we were able to register more taxpayers on these taxes. And what we did, meaning that we using the Rwanda Lands Management System and the National Identification System, the Rwanda Utility Regulatory System, and our system, we call it e-tax. We've been able to match the data and register automatically taxpayers, and we were able to double the number of taxpayers we had by the time on our tax register. So we went from 400,000 and register around 800,000 taxpayers in a lapse of 4 months. So this really was a success, and it was because of this facility we had of access of data from different stakeholders. Thank you.
Thanks, Pascal. Monica, in terms of Kenya, any initiatives imposed by or implemented by the local government or national government in terms of the pandemic?
Thank you so much for this opportunity. It's not specifically related to the pandemic, but the National Land Information Management System that the Cabinet Secretary of Ministry of Lands and Physical Planning alluded to is actually a forum where all data is synchronized, and there are already linkages with the Kenya Revenue Authority, and soon there'll be linkages with the county governments to ensure that the tax base is broad and inclusive, and that will increase the revenue potential for the country in terms of property taxation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Jean-Claude, the situation in Cameroon?
Merci pour une fois de plus pour cette opportunité. Je dois dire que, a priori, la première implication que la pandémie a eue en ce qui concerne la collecte de l'impôt foncier, c'est que, notamment pendant et après la première vague de Covid, la collecte de l'impôt foncier a été suspendue pour un certain nombre de contribuables pendant à peu près 6 mois. Les paiements ont repris bien plus tard, mais cela n'a pas eu un impact sur le fichier dans son ensemble, ou bien sûr les modalités de collecte et de l'évaluation qui étaient arrêtées déjà avant que la pandémie ne commence. Ce qui a vraiment été le changement qui est intervenu a beaucoup plus porté sur le différé dans le paiement de cet impôt foncier.
Okay, thank you, Jean-Claude. Let me go to one of the other questions that was raised in the brief to the panelists, and that is a somewhat sort of unique way in which the property tax is administered. It involves quite a lot of personal contact with taxpayers. Property inspectors or valuers have to, visit properties. They have to inspect those properties. They may have to measure those properties internally or maybe just externally. So the question is, how has this pandemic affected the administration of the property tax in your country? So Pascal, have you any comments in terms of how the property tax administration is reacting to the various stresses that COVID-19 have placed on that administration? Over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, we were affected, but as we have these systems integrated, what we did was we moved from the comprehensive audits and conducted many desk audits, but also in terms of enforcement, because we have also what we call the GIS or Geographical Information System. This also helps us to locate properties and do enforcement, which was targeted. But yes, it's not like we used to go face to face, but we think also using systems, this can really mitigate and help to collect more without having in-face or person-to-person to collect these revenues. So we use mainly the system to have contact by calling them, sending SMS, sending emails for them, for some of them, even message on radio and televisions. I submit.
Thank you, Pascal. Monica, what was the situation in Kenya?
There are some aspects of property taxation, especially valuation for stamp duty, that require in-person site inspections and field visits. And with the outbreak of the pandemic, a lot of the property owners are hesitant to have people come into their houses to do these valuations. So we are currently working on a way to be able to do other aspects, like have a proper database in the cadastre and with proper information, so that where houses are typical, the valuer doesn't necessarily have to go to the field to conduct the inspection in order to finalize this valuation. So that will really help reduce the in-person interaction, which right now the pandemic has affected. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. Jean-Claude, over to you. Any comments on Cameroon?
Oui, merci. En ce qui concerne le Cameroun, relativement aux visites qui sont effectuées auprès des propriétaires en période de pandémie, je dois déjà dire qu'au niveau du Cameroun, depuis quelques années, 2014-2015, l'administration fiscale avait lancé une grande procédure de dématérialisation qui a également touché l'impôt foncier. Et donc, un certain nombre de segments de l'impôt foncier étaient déjà dématérialisés et ne nécessitaient plus de contact avec les contribuables, avec les propriétaires, notamment la partie collecte de données, data collection, et la partie paiement. Pour la collecte de données, l'administration a trouvé des mesures de collecte de données auprès des clients de ces propriétaires-là, des partenaires de ces propriétaires pour pouvoir collecter des données. Et enfin, pour la partie paiement, les paiements dématérialisés sont disponibles au Cameroun depuis quasiment 2016. Alors, le seul aspect qui portait encore, qui entraînait des contacts physiques avec les propriétaires était la distribution des avis. Et donc, depuis 2021, depuis janvier de cette année, l'administration a totalement dématérialisé cet aspect-là. Et même pour la distribution des avis, les transferts est fait soit par SMS dans leur téléphone, soit par des voies dématérialisées, des adresses mail si bien qu'aujourd'hui, l'ensemble du processus, comme pour les autres impôts et taxes qui sont gérés par l'administration, l'ensemble du processus est totalement dématérialisé et ne nécessite plus de visite auprès du contribuable. Merci.
Thank you, Jean-Claude. The next question, indeed, I think most of the panelists have already commented on this, but I'm going to ask it because it is pretty important given the importance that technology is now having in terms of property tax administration. So Pascal, in terms of Rwanda, again, you've already mentioned or made some comments on this, but very briefly, how has technology improved the administration of the property tax in Rwanda? Over to you, Pascal.
Thank you, William. I think, as I said earlier, we call this property or these taxes on properties are mainly immovable properties, meaning that once we have all information on the property, for me, I think there is no longer necessary to have this field visits, because the system itself can help and do it without going to the field. So for Rwanda, I think what we now have to do is maybe to make sure that information in the system are accurate. So we are now trying to work with the Land Management Authority to clean up the data. And we thought maybe as long as we have the data which are accurate, no again need to have this physical or field visit as we used to do before the COVID.
Okay, so, Pascal.
Oh, the question of at which extent technology has been servicing us, the taxation. I think as I said, we have registered massively taxpayers using the system. Now taxpayer can declare and pay online their taxes. We can do a targeted enforcement. And this has really increased our revenue collection, because in these 5 years, what I can say is that the property tax, the growth is between 0% and 25% just in 5 years when Rwanda Revenue starts helping the collection of this revenue for districts. And in terms of the ratio to the GDP, the increase is now from 0.2 to 0.3. So there is really a hope that as we try to well manage these taxes, putting in place appropriate system, the wish is to have this ratio to GDP increased as we see for the developed countries. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pascal. And Monica, maybe you could comment on how the county governments in Kenya are embracing technology in terms of property tax administration. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. The Kenya Revenue Authority has a very robust tax system called the ATAF, which has actually enabled landowners to pay their stamp duty and land rent. And now with the launch of the National Land Information Management System and the integration with the Kenya Revenue Authority, all these, the taxes collected and the reporting can be, it's easier to access the information by both authorities. And most of the local governments actually have digital databases for their rates. So technology has actually played a key role in assessing the taxes payable by each landowner. So we are moving forward in integrating all this information so that when a taxpayer comes on board, they can actually pay all their taxes instead of in a fragmented way that some goes to a different entity and another to a different entity, but where Ministry of Lands and KRA can work together so that even as the tax is collected, the reporting is actually easier for all organizations. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Monica. Jean-Claude, have you any comments on the use of technology in property tax administration in Cameroon? Over to you.
Merci. Je l'ai dit il y a quelques minutes déjà, l'importance de la technologie pour la gestion de l'impôt foncier.
Monsieur Jean-Claude, désolé de vous interrompre, mais votre mic, on vous entend très mal. Si vous pouvez ajuster votre micro, s'il vous plaît. Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Jean-Claude.
Merci. Alors, j'espère qu'on m'entend bien maintenant. Alors,
si vous pouvez augmenter votre volume un peu, s'il vous plaît.
Oui.
Bien sûr. OK.
Alors j'expliquais tantôt que la technologie a joué un rôle important dans la gestion de l'impôt foncier. Et l'impôt foncier était quasiment le dernier segment qui n'avait pas joué des systèmes intégrés de gestion des impôts et taxes au niveau de la Direction générale des impôts. Et donc, maintenant, l'ensemble des segments qui permettent l'administration de la taxe foncière a rejoint ce système-là. Si bien que même la transmission des avis qui nécessitait encore de rencontrer des contribuables ne se fait plus, se fait de manière dématérialisée. Alors, une application informatique a été développée en interne par des informaticiens pour pouvoir administrer les systèmes depuis la collecte de données jusqu'au niveau de paiement. Et l'ensemble du système est aujourd'hui géré dans ce sens-là. Nous sommes en train d'évaluer la réussite de ce système-là pour voir dans quelle mesure il peut être amélioré au regard des dysfonctionnements du début qu'on a constatés. Merci.
Thank you, Jean-Claude. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to give Odd the last word in this particular panel session. Odd, it relates to the other question that was posed to you in terms of local governments lacking the administrative capacity to exploit the potential of the property tax. Could you comment on the role that central governments could play in terms of maybe assisting local government in terms of their property tax system? Over to you, Odd.
Thank you so much. I think some of this, the answer to this question is partly already addressed by the experiences from the 3 countries which in the panel, where the central government has been very much involved in also developing system, in particular Rwanda with the e-tax system. That could not have been implemented by the local government authorities on their own. It's a very costly exercise. This could only be implemented with through the capacity and resources and the political support of the central government body. So in the case of what is the reality in many African countries is that the digitalization, the development of integrated revenue systems, e-government system really need to be coordinated by the central government. But at the same time, it is very important that one is implementing this in dialogue with the local government authority, which are to use this system. They cannot be too complex and complicated at the operational level. So, and the discussion also reflects that there are a lot of interesting experiments going on across the continent. And I think this Congress we are at now and the ATAF is would be very important to synthesize the experiences, to learn from each other's what works and not, and why so. So that I think is one of my observations from having worked on taxation and tax reforms at the local and central level, central government levels in many African countries over over 3 decades, is that there is a need to strengthen the coordination, cooperation, exchange of information between local and central governments in general when it comes to taxation. But the driving force for digitalization, e-government, must come from the central government, which has the resources, capacity to do that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Odd. Well, everyone, I think we've run over a little bit in terms of the time. I'm conscious that other things are going to be happening during the rest of the day. I feel that the comments that the panelists and the speakers have made, you know, have raised a number of questions, and you can see them in the Q&A. But I think that they have covered actually quite a lot of ground in terms of their fairly robust responses. So I think it's just left for me to thank the two presenters for the papers that they delivered, and to extend my thanks to our panelists for the engaging discussion virtually, of course. And so I look forward to the rest of the conference today and over the next couple of days. So that's all from my side. So I'm going to hand back now to the moderator, who I'm sure has some other housekeeping matters to deal with. So thank you all very, very much. It's been a pleasure to moderate you in this session. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, our session chair, Professor William McCluskey. I only wish that Zoom had a way
we can't hear you.
All right, can you hear me now? Okay, I believe now I'm audible, and yes. I just wanted, okay, thank you very much for the feedback. I just wanted to say thank you very much, Professor McCluskey, and the presenters, Dr. Seydou Coulibaly from AFDB Burundi, Mr. Adam Kagbo from the Ministry of Finance in Sierra Leone, our panelists, Commissioner General Ruganin Twali from Rwanda Revenue Authority, I see you, sir. Madam Monica Obongo, hello, sir. Madam Monica Obongo, our Deputy Director from the Ministry of Lands, right here in Kenya. Mr. Jean-Claude Mondo from the Ministry of Finance in Cameroon. Thank you very much, Madam. I see you. Thank you very much for that very engaging session and just giving us different perspectives and what's happening in Sierra Leone, Cameroon, Kenya, Burundi, and Rwanda. Esteemed delegates, it is now time for our health break. However, we're going to do our health break and then move into our breakout sessions. Now, we've got 3 parallel research sessions. The links have been sent to your emails, and they've also been posted by our team on the chat box. I'm sure they're going to be reposted in just a few seconds. But to make it easy for you, allow me to screen share and show you how you can go from into your parallel sessions from the website, our homepage. So the link has been pasted on the chat box, and this is the link right here. I believe it can be seen, the events.ataf.org page. So you've got 2 options of how you can go to your parallel sessions. Option number 1, on that particular homepage, you've got 3 parallel sessions. You've got the topics right here, as you can see, as my ticker is going down. And then all you need to do is click and join the parallel session of your preference. Again, on your homepage, on the chat box, the link has been pasted. So what you do, just click on it, come and scroll through the parallel session that you choose to sit in, click on it, and it shall take you into the room. You do not need to register. Option number 2 is when you move to the agenda icon tab. And once you click on the agenda icon tab, it will take you to this page you see right here. And you can join whichever parallel session of your preference. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, allow me to sort out my screen sharing in just a minute. Okay, great. I believe the links, I can see them. They have been pasted on the chat box. Thank you, my team. You're excellent, doing a fantastic job even responding to all the queries. Remember, delegates, all your questions can be sent on the Q&A sessions, Q&A chat boxes, and the chat box is specifically for your comments and your feedback. Now, please note that for these links, it's just a click and there's no need to register. These breakout sessions will discuss the research papers on various aspects of property tax at length. A total of 36 research papers were submitted when we did the call-outs, 23 of which were selected for presentation during this Congress. Now, the 23 papers were selected after a double-blinded peer review process by over 33 ATRN scientific committee members, otherwise known as our experts. The sessions will commence at exactly 12:45 Central African time, which is in about 60 seconds. And as a delegate, you are greatly, greatly encouraged to contribute to the ongoing discussions during the breakout sessions. And yes, you're free to waltz in from one virtual room to another. So this is what, after you finish discussing in whatever parallel room you have chosen, you are free to actually move to the next one and the next one and just get to hear what your colleagues in other jurisdictions are talking about and get to also contribute. All you need to do for you to move from one room to another is to click on the links as shared to your email, as shared on the chat box, and as demonstrated earlier. Now, you will be automatically entered into your preferred room. Your voice is so important to us. Kindly let it be heard. Do not listen in pantomime. We want to hear your voice. Ask the questions, seek your clarity. We want to hear your voice because your voice is critical to building the paper that we are going to build at the end of these 3 days. Please note that after the parallel research sessions, we shall not resume to this main meeting room that we are in currently. The parallel session chairs will be responsible for closing their respective rooms. And therefore, as a Congress, we shall reconvene tomorrow for our day 2 policy dialogue at exactly 10:30 hours Central African time. Now, all session chairs and speakers are required to log in at least 30 minutes before for the media testing and briefing. Thank you all. Thank you all from all. I was not able to say thank you and hello to everybody who joined, but I saw you in the chat box. And I just want to say thank you for taking the time to join us in this meeting of minds as we change our destiny in terms of property taxes right here in Africa and the world over. So thank you very much. I see you all and I appreciate all your comments right here on the chat. And I'm hoping to see you again tomorrow as we continue day 2 of our policy dialogues. Thank you, delegates who wrote and submitted your research papers on these very important topics. This is very encouraging as it gives policymakers the confidence that will emanate from the 6th ATRN Congress that our policy recommendations based on empirical evidence and analysis for long-lasting property tax reform in Africa. Thank you, and let's build Africa one policy at a time. Stay safe, see you tomorrow, and head out to your breakout rooms. Thank you.